Hey everybody, how y'all doing today? Good. Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you so much to everybody for making this possible. Sylvia and Dana, I am forever indebted to you all. So before I begin, one of the biggest, the most important things that I see in conferences today, especially with a mission like this, is the network that you all have. Many of you all are continuing your advocacy work on campuses every single day, but you can't do this alone. And this story that I'm gonna tell you all a little bit about today is a testament of that. So for the first 2 minutes, if you can please indulge me, I know this is an introvert's nightmare, but could you please take the first 2 minutes of this presentation to introduce yourself to somebody who you have not met yet? Does that feel a little better? For me, that also aids, because I get a little nervous every single time I begin because I have all these eyes just staring at me, judging me, like, oh, your bio sounds good, but will you live up to it, or whatever that may be. So it gets me some time to get myself together, but it also gives you all some time to recognize the most important thing that you all will take away from this conference, which is each other. Doing any of the work that you all are doing, from all of the difficult dialogues that you all have been having all weekend, it's not easy. And you're gonna rely on the people around you to build your own expertise. And that's kind of how I got my start to be able to have the platform that I have today to speak to you all. So I began at the University of Missouri in the fall of 2012, coming from the Chicago area. My community was predominantly Black. So getting to the middle of nowhere, well, not nowhere, Missouri, but the middle of Missouri, 2 hours away from St. Louis and 2 hours away from Kansas City, I didn't know exactly what to expect. I didn't know how it would fit in, and I didn't even know how to go about navigating campus when I first got there. I joined an organization that Dr. McElderry, if any of you all sat through his presentation, well, I know most of you all did, but those of you all who weren't there, he spoke about an initiative called the Mizzou Black Men's Initiative. And it was a leadership organization at Mizzou that allowed a lot of us to come together and get to know the fabric of the institution and different ways in which we could get involved. When I first got on campus, I was already complaining. I was saying, like, we had this initiative called One Mizzou, and I was saying I didn't see One Mizzou. I saw Athletic Mizzou, I saw Black Mizzou, I saw Black Greek Mizzou, I saw Residence Hall Mizzou, I saw White Greek Mizzou, I saw all of these different Mizzous, but I didn't see one. And I remember saying that to the chancellor when they unveiled the chancellor's diversity initiative, and they had a little Q&A, and I was the one who was never really afraid to say, well, this is the way that I perceive campus, even though I haven't even been here for a full semester yet. And so that experience, they said, well, if you don't like what you see here or you're not feeling it so much, get involved. And so instead of saying, no, I ain't got time for that, I'm not about to do that, I took their word for it and I got involved. And I got involved in every single thing that I could, which is how I became good at like walking up to random people and being like, hey, my name is Payton and I'm this major and blah, 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 blah. So I became an orientation leader, which was a great way to meet all of our incoming classes coming into Mizzou, thousands and thousands and thousands of students over the summer. I started to connect with them, learn their stories, connect with their parents, and talk about the different frustrations or the different concerns that they had bringing their students to the University of Missouri in the middle of Missouri, especially for our Black parents coming from, south side of Chicago. It's just like, I'm supposed to drop my kid off here? Like, what's up? And so I became a resource in that way. I started to learn the fabric of the institution in terms of how the power structure worked. So I joined the Legion of Black Collegiate Student Government as a senator. And then from then on, I went to the Missouri Students Association, which was our overarching student government, to start talking about the issues of inequity, the inequities that I saw between the experience for Black students and the experience for white students. That led me to form the Social Justice Committee, where as chair, I took it upon myself to do anything and everything possible to learn as much as possible about all of our different communities on campus. Believe it or not, I did join the Asian American Association. I don't know how it happened. I was invited by who would become one of my best friends, who's Korean, and she said, you should come to our unification. It's like their orientation event at the beginning of the year. And I said, okay, well, I don't want to take up space. Let me go on and sit in the back. I was invited to sit in the front. And I just started to learn so much about a community. And I walked in at first and felt uncomfortable because I was so different. But I already was feeling uncomfortable being on campus, navigating as a Black individual. And so that's kind of where I got my start at Mizzou. was starting to really, really build a background of social justice. And I sat through many a conference like this, like you all are sitting through, where I learned from so many people who I respected and looked up to on campus. And I wouldn't be where I am today if I wasn't standing upon their shoulders. So this presentation is about intentional, intersectional leadership and what that looks like to me. And so I'll flash forward through my time on campus to the fall of 2014. And Dr. Jonathan McElderry yesterday kind of walked you all through a timeline of events that happened at the University of Missouri. But I'll kind of explain this through pictures, through my own lens, what it was like to be a student leader throughout that. In the fall of 2014, me and my vice president, we decided that we were going to embark on a mission to ignite Mizzou. This hadn't been done before. Never before had 2 Black students represented the University of Missouri as the president and vice president of the Student Association. For the really, 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 really big state schools, this is a big deal. A lot of these institutions, their student leadership goes all the way up to the governor's office of the state. So representing the flagship institution of the state of Missouri was a very, very difficult feat just to be able to be elected into leadership. So Brenda and I ran on a plan of equity and inclusion and accountability, not only for our administration, but for ourselves and for the student government. Because I didn't think that it was important to just continue to point the finger all the time at all these other people who could be doing better without first looking at myself and saying, what can I do? How can I be a better advocate? How can I be a better leader? And so Brenda, reluctantly at first, she didn't want to, she was just like, oh, you crazy, I'm not about to do this. But she ended up saying yes at the very last minute, and we got the signatures that we needed, and we embarked on their mission to ignite Mizzou. Some people told us we wouldn't win. There was one student I remember particularly because he told us, hey, like, you're very charismatic, you're great and all that, but you're only gonna get the minority vote. And that's not enough to win Mizzou. You don't have the Greek vote, you don't have this, you don't have that, because with campuses, it's all about the different demographics of student populations that you can reach into. Little did he know we had both. And that was a way to unite campus more than it had ever been before. And for going into it thinking that we wouldn't win, or there would be the possibility that we would not win, we ended up receiving the highest voter turnout in the history of the University of Missouri, because we empowered our minoritized and marginalized students to stand with us and believe with us. But we also offered something for our majoritized students, so our white population, and let them know that we would be there for them too. And they all believed in a better university, at least with the possibility of our leadership. And so it was a really, really interesting task, a really, really interesting feat to be a part of. I was also in the process of joining my fraternity at the time, which meant that I would be the first person representing a National Pan-Hellenic Council organization as president of the Missouri Students Association, where interfraternity council people have always sort of led the guard. So flash forward to the fall of 2015, many of our different leadership initiatives were in place. Many of our different educational initiatives were in place. We were embarking on a mission of inclusion. So that was ranging anywhere from putting out a map for all of our social justice centers and our gender-neutral restrooms on campus, to including the Missouri International Student Council in the joint session of student governments so that they have voting power and representation, not only in our student legislation process, but even in our homecoming parade, as we move to creating an idea of a campus that really prioritized and included people from all different identities. So I will read this Facebook post to you. This is the one that went viral at the time. But this was following everything that was kind of going on at Mizzou. And I remember sitting in a meeting where I was representing the students at Mizzou, and there were other student government leaders representing their respective campuses. And we had to decide the legislative priorities that we were going to send to Jefferson City. And the issue of DACA students came up. And I remember being the only one in the room who was saying, like, hey, y'all, like, this should be an issue that we rally around. This should be something that we should prioritize to the legislature. Because all of us sitting in this room are American-born. And it's something, when we talk about privilege and having a platform on which to stand, including people who aren't necessarily at the table, elevating their voices is a good part, is a strong part, is an important part of good leadership. And when I got outvoted, I remember thinking on this experience that I had the night before and writing it down, which was a sum of all of the different things and events that were happening at Mizzou as we embarked on the historic fall of 2015, following the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. It says, warning, explicit language. I just want to say how extremely hurt and disappointed I am. Last night as I was walking through campus, some guys riding on the back of a pickup truck decided that it would be okay to continuously scream nigger at me. I really just want to know why my simple existence is such a threat to society. For those of you who are wondering why I'm always talking about the importance of inclusion and respect, it's because I've experienced moments like this multiple times at this university, making me not feel included here. Many of you are so privileged that you'll never know what it feels like to be a hijab-wearing Muslim woman and be called a terrorist or a towelhead. You don't have to think about where you can go and not be targeted for violence because you don't fit into the gender binary. You'll never know what it feels like to see Memorial Union every day and into the side like a second-class citizen because after 90 years, there's still no accessible way to enter the tower. You've never been spit on walking down 9th Street or misgendered at Pizza Tree because they called out your birth name. You never had to experience people throwing drinks on you and yelling faggot at you from the patio at Big 12 as you walk past on the street holding hands with your partner. You might never have to think twice about what you're wearing walking around campus at night so that someone won't think it's okay to take ownership of your body because your outfit was asking for it. If your simple existence is not a political statement, I'm really gonna need for you to check your privilege. These are some of my experiences and the experiences of the ones closest to me. This is what I'm fighting against every day in boardrooms, conferences, meetings, classrooms, the Capitol, and in my daily life. This is my reality. Is it weird that I think that I have the right to feel safe here too? If you see violence like this and don't say anything, yes, you are a part of the problem. It's the reason why it's on us. Black lives matter, trans rights are human rights, and love is fucking love. If you want to fight for social change at Mizzou, there are so many different outlets. Apply to be a diversity peer educator. Stop by any of our wonderful centers of social justice. Educate yourselves and others. Hold your family, friends, fraternity brothers, and sorority sisters accountable. And if this post made you feel uncomfortable, good. That means I'm doing my job. It's time to wake up, Mizzou. Your nigger, faggot, Missouri Students Association President, Payton Head. So one thing that I was not expecting was for it to go viral. I honestly couldn't, once I posted it, I couldn't even tell you what I put. I was seeing red when I wrote it. Because the reality of the situation is I've been where you're sitting. Conference after conference, meeting after meeting, town hall after town hall, diversity education after diversity education, learning everything that I could to be an effective ally, be an effective leader, be an effective person, just be someone who knows how to advocate. But more importantly, just be a person, be a better human being. And I felt like for so long, all of this work that I was doing, just didn't matter because I'm doing all of this and working so hard every single day. And I just see people walking around on campus with their Chipotle and their Starbucks, nothing else, nothing is happening. And this was a very, very stressful time on campus. For those of you all who have been working in higher ed or any grad students in the room who probably remember what it was like to be on campuses around the nation, not only in the fall of 2014 following Ferguson, but in the fall of 2015 when students at universities from all across the country rose up in response to the events that were happening at Mizzou. It was a lot. And I think that's where this was coming from. I want to talk, too, about the privilege of having a platform on which to speak. If I'm not mistaken, less than 25% of people in the entire country have access to higher education. So those of you all who are in this room, there is a privilege that you all have. And there's a responsibility that comes with that to continue to educate as you educate yourselves. I never really thought about what it meant to have this privilege until I saw the reaction to this post. And for me, like, this was the second time something like this had happened to me. And that is what inspired me to run for president in the first place. So I was like, I'll be whatever if this happens to me and I'm the president right now. And it was interesting to see the way in which people talked about it. Well, didn't they know you were the president? Like, everybody knows who you are, and blah, 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 blah. Your respectability will not save you. Because at the end of the day, I was simply another black man on the street. And that's the thing that I want to talk to you all about. It's like, what does it mean to operate from a place of privilege? What does it mean when you have a platform that you all have right now, to be able to enact change? And what does it mean to build a coalition around that? Because you are hearing my story, but this wasn't just me. And I'll go into why this became a big thing. The Washington Post called the next day and did a feature piece. And it was called What the Student Body President Did After, he was called the N-word. The Root wrote about it, BET, everybody was so enthralled by this post. But for me, my mentality was, people deal with this every single day at campuses all across the country and off campuses all across the country too. What made this special? And for every journalist who wanted to come in and get a story about like, oh, well, what is happening at Mizzou, or what is happening here, or this is a single isolated incident, which is the way the media reported on it, they were just like, oh, well, the thing that I tried to stress them is just like, I want you to know like why you are here. You're not here because of me. You're not here because this happened. You're here because this happened to the student body president. This happened to somebody occupying this office. So as you all start to think about leveraging power, leveraging resources, think about the role in which you play just based off of the position or position that you don't occupy on your campuses. Danielle Walker, a brilliant graduate student, led the very first demonstration at Mizzou. Because after the administration, like after this went viral and there was no response from the administration, students were being concerned because this was something that was normalized at Mizzou. It felt like, at least by the administration. And Danielle Walker's protest was called Racism Lives Here. And it was this idea that racism lives here, but so do we. And people, they united in this moment. And it was a way to start to elevate the issues that were happening all across campus. There were multiple walkouts and study-ins in response to other events that were happening on campus that Dr. McElderry spoke about yesterday. Everywhere from the Legion of Black Collegian student government practicing for homecoming and being verbally assaulted in the heart of campus, to a swastika being drawn in feces in one of our residence halls. That fall, a graduate student by the name of Jonathan Butler embarked on a hunger strike to have the president removed from office, which brought people together of all different backgrounds to ensure that he would eat again. In addition to challenging the institution to live up to the values on which it said that it stood for: respect, responsibility, discovery, and excellence. I think what was so powerful to me was seeing the importance of coalition. In a movement, if people don't move, you don't have a movement. And that's why it was great to see people from all different backgrounds come together and fight against institutional oppression. And the person in the white standing in the middle is my twin sister, who I actually followed to Mizzou, although I would never admit that in front of her. There were times when we cried. There were moments when we didn't know what to do, what was next. There were death threats that were put on us. There were all kind of phone calls coming in to campus. This picture, for those of y'all who work in higher ed, you've probably seen this multiple times as the poster child for obstruction against First Amendment rights and freedom of speech. And that's one of the reasons why I talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion and equity education in every single facet of education. What does it look like when you're talking about diversity within the media? Because that wasn't the conversation. The conversation was students obstructing the media. But what wasn't told was how many people Many journalists came down to the university with their stories already written as to what narrative they wanted to tell about black students on campus, that they're uneducated, that they're coddled, that they're whiners, that they have money and they don't have any reason to complain because they have the best of it. But in actuality, many of those things give you even more credibility to talk about the issues because yes, you have all of these resources and there are still problems and there are still things that we all can work through together if we can at least acknowledge that there's an issue. I bring up this poster to talk about the importance of being intersectional in the work that you do. To me, it's interesting how the things that happened at Missouri kind of mirrored what happened in the nation afterward and even before. Black Lives Matter, the viral hashtag started with the death of Trayvon Martin, and it was founded by 3 black queer women. The call to action, MU for Mike Brown at the University of Missouri, was brought together by 3 black queer women who have always been the leaders of almost every single major movement in the history of the United States. So it's important that we have those conversations about intersectionality. What does that look like in our movement work? What does that look like in the advocacy work that we do on our campuses? What does it look like on the advocacy work that we do within our communities? As I talk about privilege, I think it's important to talk about the role of the football team, which is why many of you all probably have heard about this. This was the tail end of the major part of the movement, where the football team got together, and I remember I got a text from my fraternity brother, and he told me that the football team would be getting together and going on a strike until the hunger strike ended, meaning Jonathan eats again. And at that point, everybody was boycotting everything at the university. So I'm just like, well, what is the football team gonna do? Like, y'all brought water to the campsite, thank you. But this happened. And this is in our athletic training center. This is, big Mizzou SEC football. And sitting right in the middle, oh, come on, laser pointer, yes, well, I guess he's not right in the middle, was the coach of the Mizzou football team. And he said, I stand with my team and we are one. For those of y'all who follow like the big state schools and big football and all that, you know that the person who is the coach of the flagship institution's football team is the highest paid individual in the entire state. He has money, long money. He has all the power and privilege in the world. He didn't have to do this, but he did. And I think that shows the power of using the platforms of privilege that you do have, whatever it may be, to bring people together, to have difficult dialogues, and to enact change. One thing that was so powerful about this movement is I talked about a little bit the role of the media and how that's when I first started to see that there was bias in the media. I didn't really think about it before because it was never, news. But the way in which the protests were covered, it was making it seem like Mizzou was the only place where racism happened. It was saying Mizzou, I remember reading one headline that said, Mizzou, hotbed of racial harassment. And to me, I think that is such an ignorant statement to make because anytime you build a country, a settler colonial nation where you kill people from sea to shining sea, and you enact these systems, that control and oppress people, your entire institution, your entire country is a hotbed of racial harassment. And when you minimize it to the point of it just being this one university in the heart of America, that takes away from the fact that this is an issue that is at the very bedrock of the United States of America and many settler colonial societies. And it's something that we can't address if we don't talk about. But the students were the ones who took away this narrative. Because when everybody kept making it seem like it was just a Mizzou issue, students at the University of Alabama, Birmingham said, it's us too. Students at Yale University, when people thought this was just a public Southern university issue and Missouri is actually not really in the South. It likes to think it's Southern, but it's like it's, slave state, free state. That's why it's an interesting state, Missouri Compromise. This can happen at even elite institutions too. When people are just like, oh, well, that's just a public state, school issue. And when this started happening at Yale and students from all over started rising up, it really started to change the narrative and even the reporting around issues of exclusion, issues of racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, whatever it may be on college campuses in America. Half the time, for those of you all who probably live here, and for me, being from Chicago, Nevada is probably not even on your mind at all. I guarantee you some of y'all can't point to it on the map. It's okay, it's okay. So I'm like, wow, and it was humbling to see that, these students were standing in solidarity with us, but to even think about the scope of these issues reaching that far, reaching to every single place in our country. I believe that's Texas. University of Southern California, where you would think would be all blue and liberal and sunny. They deal with the same power structures. So this was a very difficult decision because throughout all of this, there was decisions that had to be made from the student leadership in order to ensure that the students were protected. At this point, there were several incidents of community negligence from our administration, from us trying to reach out to the police department to make sure that our Black Culture Center was protected. And there were threats, all kind of threats coming in from all around the nation. When our own information was made public. So this kind of lets you know, is a summary of what kind of took place at Mizzou. Starting from the very beginning, talking about the August of 2014, where the University of Missouri met the shooting of Mike Brown with silence. When universities all over the world were having a conversation about what Ferguson meant not only to America, but to the world. These students were left stranded, forced to face an increase in tension and inequality with no systemic support. Over the last 16 months, the quality of life for our students has only worsened. And then I'll read down here where it says, students from many different races, genders, sexualities, abilities, and other nationalities have not heard their identities represented by the 4 core values of this institution. We believe in the power of this student body. We are dedicated to this school and community, and as such, we cannot abide a system president that resolutely refuses to learn about the people he is supposed to represent. Our students deserve better. As the executive cabinet of the undergraduate student government, representing the 27,000 undergraduates at Missouri's flagship institution, we formally demand the immediate removal of the UM system president. And this was a very difficult decision to make. I talked to you all again and again about the importance of coalitions and coalition building. The students from the University of Missouri, Kansas City reached out because they saw what was happening. The students at Lincoln University, which was the historically Black college, created because Black students were not allowed to attend the University of Missouri until the year 1950, the year my mom was born. So like for those of us who are just like, oh, this is just a long time ago, we are still seeing the effects of what it means to talk about inclusion, equity, and even integration in many different senses. We went to Kansas City well, we had a meeting with the system president that day where he basically said that not only was he not stepping down, he was not going to address any of the demands or any of the issues at this point that had gone international. Campus was a very difficult place to be. ESPN was there. Al Jazeera, the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, Good Morning America, all had microphones and were standing on our quad, interviewing and photographing every single thing that was happening. At this point, Spike Lee was making his way to campus and making a documentary. And to sit in this meeting and have a president say, not only am I not gonna step down, I'm not gonna address any of these issues, I think was the moment in which we realized what we were truly up against. And with the boycott of the football team, which hits at a capitalistic structure of an institution, where $1 million was on the line if they forfeited this game, And I think it almost equated to $5 million in other fees that Dr. McElderry talked about before. We saw the resignation of our system president and the removal of our chancellor, which came from a vote of no confidence from the deans of all of the colleges, for people who just thought this was angry students complaining about being called out of their names. Jonathan was able to eat again. And I show this picture before I move to Q&A because to me this shows the importance of how this did bring people together. It was not all peachy keen. There was a lot of division that was going on campus at the time, and even to this day. But through this moment, I think is something that represents the power of when people come together. The power of when you all use your voices in a collective manner to enact change. For those of you all who you think that you're gonna be okay just working in your specific silos and in your areas, you need people around you to advance your cause. And I'm gonna end with this quote from Angela Davis, and then we can go into Q&A. And it says, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time." This is something that is needed from you all. This is something that is needed from your generation. I think it's easy to sit around and say, you know what, I'm not gonna engage, I'm not gonna look at Twitter, I'm not gonna watch the news, I don't wanna be a part of any of this, and I think it's important for us to breathe, fight, and repeat. But there is much work to be done. But I think that we have to believe in this radical ideology that you can change the world, that what you're doing does have impact. And when you do it with other people, you can scale that impact to the fullest. So thank you all.